So I want to just give a few reflections. I mean, and I think any one of you could give your reflections right here, as I am, about what internationalism really means to our city. It's everything. We are a city of immigrants, and we're a nation, obviously, of immigrants. I don't need to tell any of you that. But we all have our story, and I'm going to really begin and end with a story today. My beginning story was when I walked out my door this morning. I was with my father-in-law, who stops by to see his grandchildren regularly. Gus is from Lebanon, and he said to me, I said, Gus, I said, any notes to our international community of friends when I come up? And he says, tell them what they already know, but what everybody else needs to know, that the way we think of our country, we think a lot more of our country than people sometimes give us credit for how we think about it. He was basically saying he loves this place, okay, as we all do. And people need to, in the narrative, realize the immigrant community loves this country. My father-in-law came here when he was 18 years old, and he literally came right through JFK Airport, and he literally needed to make a phone call that a kind resident of New York helped him make, and he got to his uncle, and he took a train out to Chardon, Ohio, and he worked his way over to Villisca, Iowa, and down to North Carolina to go to school, and he's living here, working here, and did a 30-year career with Geauga County. He loves this country, and his point is he wants everybody to know that immigrants love this country sometimes more than those who've been born here and lived generations here. My stepfather, I said this to a few of you at the Centennial of the Cultural Gardens last spring, but my stepfather came over from Italy, and a similar story, came over at 7. It's amazing what this country does. Gus and Lenny have talked over many holiday dinners, my father-in-law, Natalie's dad, and my stepfather. And my stepfather came over from Italy when he was 7 years old on a ship. He pulled up into the New York harbor, and the first thing he remembers is an American on soil giving him a stick of chewing gum when he was a 7-year-old kid. Warm welcoming into this country by 2 kids coming from other places. And interestingly, there was about a 10-year gap between their arriving here. But Lenny and my father-in-law one night realized that in Lebanon, along the Mediterranean Sea, my stepfather had been brought into the U.S. Marines. So he served in the Marines, and he was a peacekeeper in the Mediterranean, overseeing things in Lebanon. My father-in-law, who was living in Lebanon at the time, said, I was looking at your ship in the Mediterranean. So here's 2 guys that finally would find their way to America, and they were looking at each other over the Mediterranean. That's what this is all about. We all have our story. So, I'm going to just quickly reflect a little, as I will later tonight, on just the history of our city and immigration, but you know what it all means. We've had many waves of our international community coming to this area. Again, not to recount any history you don't already know, but obviously the very big migrations around, first, the origin of our city. As we could talk about city planning, Moses Cleveland came right up the river. He was already guided earlier. Washington's team 40 years earlier had seen that there was a strategic area out off of the lake with the river that's connected to it, and this would be a fine settlement for the Connecticut residents to come this way. So Cleveland found his way here, but many waves of New Englanders who come from Europe came thereafter, after our city was founded on the shores of essentially Whiskey Island and Lake Erie in 1796. World War I obviously brought a whole new host of immigrants pre and post the war. And the Great Migration from the South, African Americans coming up, working here in our manufacturing community, a wonderful migration of people, literally that about now celebrating almost the 100th anniversary of that. But our city was really beginning to populate thanks to the waves of immigrants that came in. The Second World War, obviously, pre and post, brought more immigrants to this city. And today, and I skipped over a few of the sort of subtext of immigration, but obviously we had a big Eastern European migration here again in the 1980s. But we've today, I come from a place in University Circle where we've got a whole new wave of immigration from persons from all over the continents of the globe, with a heavy movement of people from the Pacific region coming our way to work in our hospitals and in our universities. Taking a step back to our city, what are we but a city of neighborhoods? We are, obviously, that's what defines the culture and the character of who we are. Again, as I mentioned, the St. Clair community, the Croatian, the Serbian, the Slovenian community, which brings forth great buildings like Slovenian Hall, the Slavic village area south of here, the Czech, the Polish, bringing wonderful places like Bohemian Hall, St. Stanislaus Church. Ohio City, the German, the Irish, bringing forth workers that work the canals. Tremont, the German, Greek, Polish, Slovaks, Syrian, Ukrainian, Russian. I mean, Tremont, if you want to see the melting pot, just go to the neighborhood of Tremont, right? I mean, I don't know how many of you know this, and I hope my facts are correct, but Ken Kovac not only is the choir director, has been the choir director at the St. Theodosius Russian Church, he played himself in the movie Deer Hunter as a young choir director. That's how deep our cultural soul is in Tremont. So when you see Ken, or if you ever go back and watch the movie Deer Hunter, it's a tough movie, but it's a great, gritty movie that showcases Cleveland treasures like Tremont. Ken's in it as a young actor, if you didn't know that. Dan's shaking his head yes, as the fact check is, and yes, that's the truth. He's got a great voice. And the culture of our community, the Collinwood, the Irish, the Italian, the Slovenian, right here, just to the east, or to the west, Asian town, and growing as an Asian community, a polyculture of Asian. Central Cedar, African-American migration point, and obviously in places like Glenville that have seen just great immigrants from all aspects, from when its early days as a farm to its rural pasture state to Jewish community, African American community, and the great opportunities along the East Boulevard area to see a community that's held in its wonderful fabric and continues to be this great migration point. We're seeing it. And I'd be remiss if I didn't, sort of ending up at Glenville, get back to the Cultural Gardens. I think it's the greatest real estate in the city, overlooking the Cultural Gardens. But when you look at the Cultural Gardens today, so many of you represent gardens either built or in progress. 30 Cultural Gardens already built, 6 or 7 more coming up. I think Scottish, Vietnamese, Mexican, Lebanese, Native American, African American, and second phase, to name a few, right? What other gardens did I miss that are in the build now? That are
Pakistan.
Pakistan. Thank you, Dan. So that shows a community that continues to grow and building off of a community that has 30 cultural gardens already in place. So Weidenthal's vision, and that was Leo Weidenthal back 100 years ago, when he first visited the dedication of the Shakespearean English Garden, said, hey, we should do this for all the community. And the next garden, the Hebrew Garden, the next garden after that, the German Garden, the Italian Garden. And nations, as we know, can be in a disparate place with one another in terms of their global relations, but they're at peace and harmony right in the cultural gardens. So what does it all mean? A friend of mine in Columbus, a lifelong friend now living in Columbus, actually a schoolmate who's been most of his adult life now in Columbus, I went down to visit him last week and said, you got a great city on the rise down here in the capital city. And he said to me, yeah, but I've said it before and I'll say it again, Cleveland's got a soul. And I think he's right. And if we represent the soul of that community, that if you don't have that polyculture, that international flavor, and Columbus may not have what we have, we don't have the soul and the depth that we have. In our city, we're still hoping that population-wise we're going to stabilize. We lost in the last census 11% of our population. And I'm feeling that we're beginning to stabilize it, but there are still neighborhoods that are literally hemorrhaging population. In University Circle, I have to wear my UC hat once in a while when I talk about what we're up to. We grew 11% in the last census. So 11% down citywide, 11% up in a neighborhood like University Circle. What's the delta? What's the difference? Absolutely, it's about the international community that has migrated to University Circle. That's been the population difference. We've welcomed, like the city of New York, that grows because it continues to welcome people from other places. We are a place of 100 different languages and as many communities in 1 square mile, maybe 2 square miles if you count out to the Cleveland Clinic. So our fastest growing cohort these days, Asian community. But actually, over the years, it just continues to cycle different communities coming in from different places. And we're, like I said, a community of 100 different nations. We put out a sign last summer, not a sign, a series of signs that welcomed people literally in every language. I think maybe some of you have seen them along Euclid Avenue. It was intentional. We knew we were going to have 50,000 visitors in 1 week in July. We had 15,000 media along with them with a convention. And it was intentional to say we welcome the world. We wanted the world to understand that we're a welcoming community. What has it meant for us in terms of international community in a place like University Circle? It's meant that we've built to a density of development where people really mix it up. They want to be around interesting places. They want to be around interesting people. They value diversity. It's helped us build a great transit community. You know, Cleveland has all these communities and all these streets. Councilman, you know, right down West 25th and many of our great old corridors were streetcar corridors. Some of them are coming back a little bit, like Euclid Avenue, as better transit corridors, but it's because our immigrants are used to riding transit, getting on transit, and taking it as a first resort, not a last resort. Again, an international community that's leading away. Repopulation, again, 11% up, and let's think about that in all of our neighborhoods. Can you take the character of the neighborhood, make it an interesting place that people from other places want to be around, and can you welcome them? Culture, business, ideas, I skipped all by those very fast, but businesses and ideas, in the end, that's what this is all about. I'm not sure where we would be in University Circle without an international community. Where would the Cleveland Orchestra be? Where frankly, the population that sits in the seats of the orchestra comes from all over the world. And I'm talking about the players, not the spectators, right? They come from all over the world. I had a visiting conductor. I took him on a walking tour not too long ago from the orchestra steps. We walked off the steps and I said, "Is it true? Are we one of the best in class?" He said, "Of course. There's the Berlin, there's the Vienna, and there's the Cleveland." And not necessarily in that order. So, tops in class. Where would the Cleveland Clinic be without an international community? Where would Case Western Reserve University be without an international community? It's not only University Circle, it's where would Cleveland be? So again, our welcoming signs were intentional. And Ken asked me to just give a couple of observations as you guys are about to dive in and talk about issues that you want to tackle as a group of leaders in the international community. He's asking my thoughts on what I thought were the challenges facing us in the international community, and also the opportunities for internationally serving organizations and how we can assist. I think the big issue, simply, I said I start with a story, is the narrative. The narrative has been fundamentally contested, and it's up to us to sort of write it on its course. It's been fundamentally contested in a lot of rhetoric in and around the country. We've been deluged by that rhetoric, and I'm going to just be a little on the edge saying that here. He told me to be. He said, be provocative. But I think the narrative sometimes gets pulled away from us, and we are really the stewards of the story that you'll further develop tonight. The story, I think, that is a story about, again, the basics, that immigrants build cities, that immigrants build businesses, and that immigrants pencil out as really good, productive citizens in this country. I'm looking at one who I know by the many businesses he's had that I've frequented over the years. You build the country by the good work you do, and this is up to us to sort of reframe that narrative from Cleveland, Ohio. Up until the middle of the last half of the last century, we were predominantly immigrants or first-generation Americans. But today we're only 6% international in the city of Cleveland. And again, I got to keep saying thank you to him. I love that Councilman Cummins is here because he shows up, because he understands this. And I think getting this further embedded in his colleagues and the county colleagues and our partners around the region as public officials go, to get the fact that immigration and immigrants and international residents matter. We are sitting at 6%, where again, pre-1950 we were over the 50% marker. We have also correlatively lost, as we've lost our international population, or our percent foreign-born, we've lost population generally. In 60 years, Cleveland's lost 60% of its population. The what if comes to mind. What if we had doubled down on really focusing on bringing people to Cleveland, welcoming people to Cleveland, and focusing on newcomers, as well as those who live here? We'd have the numbers that New York has. New York continues to rise because it continues to welcome people from all over the world. So I think it begins and ends with our narrative, and how are we owning that narrative, and what are we doing to really acknowledge how immigrants do build our cities. Again, on the multimedia, in the multiple ways that we do this, we need to continue to tell our story. Some of you I'm pointing out to Dan and his camera, he continues to tell that story. You all tell that story, but how can we find partners in our network to further tell that story? I think this is a good place to just acknowledge this very business right here. I think it speaks for itself, but if I haven't, I've known Radhika over the years. She came not with a lot of money to this country. She found her way to Case Western Reserve University. She continued to apply sort of her business savvy to business itself. We've worked through the investment of New Markets tax credits on multiple deals here in the city. We're closing through a product that she's helped present to the port through the NeoDiff Fund. We're closing on a support to a new steel plating company. We're continuing to help university hospitals build a women's and children's hospital. But I have a partner in Monica who has a consulting business who put her savvy to work in Cleveland, Ohio. That represents the net on that fund alone is $40 million. This is an individual who's doubled down on this building and this business. By the way, great food tonight. Kansas, I think. Thank you. But she's done it. She's just one great example in a town full of many great examples that has figured out how to really make the American story her story. What we have to do is turn that story around and say, this is the American story. And I want to sort of end on my family story again. I told you about the map that is in my kid's school. I was talking to my daughter just before I came here. She's 8, my son's 7. And her friends and his friends' names are Shivam, Mariana, Taranika. You get the sense. They are in a global culture. This is for us to welcome, for us to foster, and for us to, again, claim the narrative. So let's double down on that story and tell that story about how we as Clevelanders welcome, how we interface across multicultural communities, how we ideate. I've learned that word in the last couple of years. I'm not sure it's really a word, but how we ideate. We generate ideas together when we're together from different places. How we support cultural exchanges that naturally breed ideas because they bring people from different places and different perspectives to really collaborate on new ideas. And how, again, immigrants build businesses in cities. So, again, my father-in-law, let them know that this country means more to us than they might ever know. I'll end on that story. He's made good of it. Ferris has made good of it. My stepfather's made good of it. My kids are making good of it. You're making good out of this. This is the American story that is really the story of an international America. Thank you for the time and letting me say a few things tonight, and I wish you well on your next brainstorming together.